Okay, so a fellow YouTuber had suggested that I check the bed of the mill to make sure that it was parallel to the to the ways, I guess, basically by checking the height from front to back, and it's well within a thou. I barely saw the dial indicator move. It might have moved a quarter thou, maybe half a thou at most. And I think that was just a bump on the deck, so it certainly doesn't account for the 17th thou. This thing seems to be out from side to side. Now, that same YouTuber had suggested that I take a known square piece of stock, clamp it to the bed, flip the milling vise over, clamp it to the block, presumably so this was flat against it, and then square up the base. But before I go to that level there, I want to make sure that I'm not going to make something worse, by doing that. And what I want to do is I want to check that the axis of rotation of this stupid vise is parallel or not parallel to the deck of the machine. I think I was talking yesterday or the other day about it being perpendicular, and I meant parallel. Basically, by that I mean that as this thing rotates, if the axis of rotation isn't quite right, I might level it this way, but it'll twist and I'll be all wacky at some other angle. So what I figured I'd do is I'd put my test indicator back in here and turn this to as close to 90 degrees as it'll go, and then run the test indicator along it, because this is currently running parallel to the y-axis here, within a thou along the base. If I turn it and it's no longer parallel, in this case to the deck, along the whole face of it, then it means that that axis of rotation is wacky, and whatever I do, I've got to compensate for that as well. If it doesn't change, then it does mean that this surface is the surface that's out and not the bottom of it. And so all I do by taking stuff off the bottom is make, my axis of rotation wacky. So I'm going to try that out and we'll see how we go. Okay, so this is interesting. This might actually prove that the other guy was right. At this end of the milling vise, I don't know what this is. It's probably pretty close to 90 degrees. I think it's probably 85 or something like that. I can't get it any higher because the vise will hit the quill. But with it like this, I've zeroed it, and I'll move it to the other end, and I'll show you what the reading is at that. Okay, so I've moved the test indicator all the way over, and it doesn't look too bad. You'd think it's reading about 6 thou, but what you don't see is the fact that the test indicator has done one full revolution, which is 30 thou, and come back around to 6, nearly 7 thou, and I haven't tracked all the way across because I'm close to reaching the maximum limits of my test indicator here. So it's actually 35 thou higher on that end. So this vise is just completely crazy wacky. So I'm going to probably take it apart, and I'm going to see if there's anything I can do to, square up the axis of rotation. Then I'll do my test again and see how much that improved it, because it's out more than the 17th thou from here to here. It's out close to 37 thou. Yeah, it's a bad piece of work. It's only ever, truth be known, it only was meant for drilling, I think. Okay, so I've been doing a little bit of testing. I've taken the top part of the vise off here, and I've decided that decking the bottom of the vise would have been a bad idea, and I'll tell you how I determined that. Basically what I did was I did the back side of the vise first, and what I did is I found out where the lowest point was on here, and similar to the idea of finding top dead center in a car piston, when you're reaching the bottom of the, well, we're reaching the top of the stroke, there's not actually a lot of movement in the piston. The same is true for in this trough of the circle. The angle is quite shallow at the bottom, so the difference between, you know, 1 and 2 thou at the bottom is quite a fair bit of motion on the hand wheel. So what you do is you choose a number either side of your lowest reading there, and you work in either direction from that until you get a reading, in this case, 10 thou higher than that number. You take those two numbers, you add them together, and you take the average of that, and that'll give you the center point of the unit here. Now, what I found here is that I did that on the backside, then I moved it over to here, and I found that where it came to on this side, it was about a thou higher. So that the decking this would have actually thrown it out by a fair bit. It's not off by that much, but I did figure out that my vise is definitely not square on there. So what that means is that I was indicating off this back jaw here when I did square up the vise, and that is not square. So I've got to square up the base, and then I can look at whether or not or how much squaring up this requires. Because it does look like, because the vise is twisted this way, when I indicated across the vise, I was definitely climbing a hill. So it may not be out as much as 17 thou. What it may be is that this side of the vise jaw is just simply not square. You know, like the back part it attaches to, because this is now certainly indicating flat because I fly cut it. So I'm going to figure out how to square this up as is, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so after I established that the axis of rotation was more or less parallel to the bed, it was a thou higher on this side, but I don't consider that significant. I loosened up my bolts, and I decided to use the machine surface here. Get the camera on it. Machine surfaced here as my indicators, locked the quill at that height, and then measured it across. And I think that's a reasonably good indicator of how square this thing is now that I, like I said, know that the height is more or less correct. So anyways, I've set this square in place. I'm not going to do any machining on the base of this vise, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the top portion in place, level it to 0, clamp it in place, and then I'm going to sort out what's up with the deck of that vise and what's up with the back plate of it. Okay, so we're back to this point again, and what I've done is I've got my dial indicator, and I've swept it back and forth here so that I've got less than half a thou of variance from front to back. So, you know, at least according to this surface, this vise is level or at 0 degrees, and I swept it across that way onto this side, and I'm about 15 thou higher, so at least that's consistent. I've already figured out that I know that the base of the vise is okay, so I know that's out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this jaw off, and I'll deck that, but I'm going to also, before I do that, I'm going to check to see how far out this face is now. And at the same time, I'll probably take an end mill and just run it along that edge to square it off some. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so just to confirm, I checked the squareness of the vise across here, and it's 23 thou out. So that you know, what I said before is exactly true. I'll deck this surface, and then I'll take this mounting plate off, clean that up along the back side, and hopefully this vise will be reasonably square. I'll do the same to this side as well. I'll put this back on after I deck this surface, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm done reworking this mill vise, or at least I hope I am. I used a shell mill to surface this, and I moved this vise back forward so I can do this part as well. And then I used an end mill to do this surface, so now it's square relative to the base there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this jaw back in. I'm going to surface the top of it. But I have to figure out what I'm going to do with this jaw. Because it's the moving jaw, it's got some looseness in it, and obviously decking this, you know, increase that that motion. And granted, if it becomes a problem, I might have to put some shims under this, because I took probably about 20 thou off this, maybe 25. But I'll wait and see. It may be that I'll end up remaking this piece. It's not that big that it couldn't be made out of a block of steel. Just milled it out and remade. It is held in place by this round bar, and there doesn't seem to be too much play in it, but there is definitely some. Certainly there's enough from side to side. In any case, I'll probably take this piece off, make sure it's flat, then I'll face that side, and then I'll do the tops of both of these things here to get them to about the same level, so that if I ever want to indicate off of it or something like that, it's going to be reasonably consistent. Okay, here's the finished vise. Obviously I went and I faced this end off the end mill. I cleaned this up the top of both of these. I'd faced off this surface here with an end mill. It's this is resting against. I fly cut both sides of this so that it's nice and consistent. Of course I decked this bit here as well before. Now I went and I took a test indicator and I indicated along this jaw to see how parallel it was, and it was pretty good. It was consistent all the way up to here, which is odd, and then it fell off a bit. And the only thing I can conclude is that when I was touching or taking the burr off with the file, I might have taken a little bit off on this corner. If it proves to be a problem, I'll just face this whole jaw off again and try again with it. Well, I'll face this off in the vise with an end mill and try again. But right now I'm not too worried. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rotate this up to about there somewhere, and I'm going to run the test indicator along it again and just see that I get a consistent value across it in that manner. Matter of fact, you can actually see I've actually knocked off a little bit at the top when I was doing it, by the difference in the color, of course. Anyways, I'm going to try that, and then I think I'm done with this thing. Okay, I've tried indicating at this angle, and I'm still not getting great values, and the only conclusion I can come to is, I don't know, this vise may not be concentric on either side, these two rings. There's not much I can do about that because there's no way I can cut this this shape, so I might just have to accept it and hope it's not going to be too bad at lower angles. I don't see myself ever exceeding 45 degrees, and this is 85, so I'm going to hope that the error is minimal at 45.